Welcome back to Highwheel Woodworks. I'm Tim Eggers. Today I'm going to try to teach you as much as I can about table saw use and, more importantly, table saw safety. Often thought to be the workhorse of the shop in terms of ripping all of your materials down to your widths. Most people consider it one of the more dangerous tools in the shop, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I think the more dangerous one is the one that's between here and here. That's where mistakes have their genesis. All these do is manifest it, and the power equipment just execute it. So learning how to do things right and in the right sequence is very, very important in terms of operating a table saw safely. So we're going to start out with obviously having our guard in place whenever we can. There are some operations that will negate that. If you're running a crosscut sled or something like that, your guard will get in the way. Second thing to always look at is the height of your blade. If we're looking at safety, we want to minimize any risk at all. Anything that's possible risk-wise, we want to mitigate that. So we have our blade setups that when we're looking at it from the side here, we've got 3 to 4 teeth showing above the top of our surface. That's all the higher it needs to be. The more blade sticks out of there, the more exposure there is to the blade and your blade getting to your fingers. So keep it set down there to where there are just 3 or 4 of the teeth sticking out above the top. This valley between the two blades here is called the gullet. That's the maximum height you want your blade to be, where you could actually see that above the top of your saw. So with that in mind, we'll keep this up just so you can see this a little better. When we're going to rip our boards down, we've got a clean edge here that we did on our joiner. We've got a clean face here that we did on our surface planer. They've got to be clean and flat so that it runs nice and tight up against your fence and down onto the deck. If they're not nice and flat, there's a risk of them coming away from the fence, which can unfortunately sometimes cause a kickback where the saw will actually grab it and throw it out the back of the saw. So what I like to do is I like to designate what my danger zone is, and that's from the beginning of my throat plate to the back of the throat plate. So when I'm starting my material going through, I'm always going to start just outside that danger zone, and I'm also going to end just outside that danger zone. I have what I call the thumb line here. If I've got my board in position just outside of my danger zone, I want my thumb to be on that thumb line, which is about 60% of the way from this edge of the board to where the blade is. With that, I can push down on that board and I can keep it from flipping down here in the back. So I'm always going to push that down, and I'm going to have my index finger always pushing on the side of my board, pushing into the fence. So my board's going to be nice and tight to the fence. My thumb is going to keep it down on the deck. I'm going to put my guard down and in place. And you'll notice on my riving knife here, the splitter, it's got the anti-kickback teeth that are spring-loaded. Always important to have those in place. When I'm here, my backhand, I'm going to push this board through. I want to have my fingers in about this configuration. I'm holding the board up as well as pushing it through. So I'm here. My left foot is going to be placed directly below the T-slot here. So I'm going to be standing right here, and I'm going to be up close. I don't want to be way back out here and away from it. You've got to get up close. So I want all of my weight directly down through my hips, my knees to the floor. I want to have that good purchase on the floor. I'm going to hold my board in place there. My hand's going to be here. And once I get this fired up, I'm going to drive it through my machine. Now, when I get to the to the point here where I'm just about completely on the deck or all the way on the deck, I can't continue to push like this. So I've got to stop for a second. I've got to turn my hand over, and now I've got to hook my thumb on the end of the board and get my fingers out here holding my board in place. Once I've gotten to the point where my board is all the way on the deck, then I don't need this left hand as a guide anymore. So where should I put it? I'm going to put it way up here. There's nothing sharp and spinny up here that can hurt me. I'm going to get it up here out of the way. I do not want to rest it down here. The chances of it slipping, and if it does, it's going to slip toward the blade. So get in the habit of putting it up here. One day after you've done it enough times, you might get lazy and put it here. But if you start out with a good habit of getting it up here, it won't end up here on the deck. So I've come up here. Now I have the predicament of my body being at a 45-degree angle to my fence, and my shoulder is all the way back here. What I want to do is I want to take my left foot out from underneath this T-slot, and I want to put my right foot there. Now I've taken my upper body and I've gone from 45 degrees away from my fence. Now I'm 90 degrees to it, so I'm perfectly perpendicular to it. That brings my shoulder forward about a foot. So when I'm pushing through here, I've got room to push it out the back side. And if you'll notice, my forearm here is pointing basically at the fence and on the deck. I want to keep it that way. That way, if there's ever a kickback or anything, my hand is going to dive over the fence or into the fence. I'm going here. I'm going to go all the way through, even though when I'm about there, my cut is actually done. I'm still going to go ahead and I'm going to go all the way through that danger zone. I'm going to clear that. And then my right hand is going to take an elevator straight up. I'm going to go straight up and over and come back this way. I'm not going to drag it down through that danger zone again. I'm not going to come out of the side here. I'm going to get in the habit of taking that straight up. When I've gotten done with my cut, if both hands are in the air like this, I can say, thank you, Jesus, I didn't cut my fingers off. Or I can say, yes, officer, whatever you say. Whichever one you choose, you've had a safe operation of your table saw, and then take your attention off what you've got going here and reach down and turn your saw off. Wait for everything to stop, and then come around the backside and extract your object piece and your scrap piece. Let's illustrate that for you one time. We're going to come over about here, take just a short little shot off of that board. Here we go. I'm outside my danger zone. My left foot is right here underneath my T-slot. My saw is now on. I get my board in place before I turn the saw on. I don't want to be drawing a board across the saw that's running for the opportunity to run into that. We don't need that. I'm going to turn it on. You notice my left thumb is on the top of the board. My right index finger is pushing it to the fence. I'm holding it up here in the back and driving it through. When I get to this point, I've got to make sure I'm holding it with my left hand. I'm turning my right hand over, hooking it with my thumb. Now I'm all the way on the deck. This hand goes out, left foot goes out, right foot goes in there. Right there, my cut is done. I still want to clear that danger zone and go all the way through. Right hand goes up. And notice what's happening with that cutoff piece. It's not going anywhere, and it's not going to unless you touch it. I stop, I wait for my saw to come to a stop. It's going to take 7 or 8 seconds, and then I can come around the side of my saw and I can extract my object piece and safely extract my cutoff piece. The reason for letting that sit there and letting the saw spool down is if I've got my cutoff piece sitting in here, it's held in place by the anti-kickback teeth that are on my guard, and it's held in place also by the fact that the blade is running by and it's kind of pushing the air away. If I foil those two safety mechanisms by pulling this out and I drive it into that blade, it could grab it, it could kick it back, it's going to go out there somewhere. So let it sit. It's always safest to let the saw come to a complete stop before you extract your pieces on it. So do that. Let's say you've got a narrow piece that you're going to cut. I always like to have a push stick close at the ready. I deploy it right there. And this is a proper push stick. I make these here in the shop, and they're consumable, so they're expendable. If it runs into the blade, so what? Those little ones that you see in the box stores all the time, that just have a little pointy end on and a little handle, don't ever use those. That's the most unsafe accessory you could buy for your table saw. When I'm going to run a narrow piece, if I'm not comfortable with my hands being in here, rather than turning my hand over to finish the cut once it's gotten on the deck, I simply grab my push stick, position it about in the middle of my board, pointing it at the fence. Again, I want that energy pointed at the fence to keep it nice and tight to the fence and tight down onto the deck. Away you go through. Another style of push mechanism or push stick that you can use are push pads like this. If you get it up there and you're comfortable with that, use that to push your piece through. Safest way to keep your hands away from the blade. Things that I don't like to see people do on a table saw. I had a gentleman one time argue with me that if he stood on this side of the saw, this side of the fence, and pushed his material through, his argument was if he had a kickback, it would go right by him, and he's correct. But if he has a kickback, what's the direction of energy as indicated by my forearm? Where's it going? Both of them are going right at the saw. So if something kicks out and it goes away, that energy is going to be forced into my blade. If I've got a guard on, that's a good thing. Unfortunately, too many people operate their saws without guards, so that's a bad direction to push your energy in. Get back over here. I want all that energy going toward that fence and down into that deck to keep that saw nice and stable, keep that cut nice and safe. Other things I've seen people do is try to be way back away from the saw, like they're afraid of it. No, get up here so all your energy is directly above your feet. You got that firm purchase on the floor, and if you're close enough to push yourself back off the saw, great. I had a guy one time come in. He had a board about this size, and he was way back here, way away from the saw. And by the time he got all the way done, he was all the way out here doing this. He was leaned out and unbalanced over a hot saw. So, of course, I had to ask him a simple question. Are you a figure skater? No. You ever been in the Olympics? No. Okay, well, then we don't do that here. Get up close to that saw, get solid foundation for your feet, and push your material through. Get your hands up, step away, shut it off, and you've had a safe operation of your table saw.